gathering here for one thing. It's the largest pro-life rally in America.
This time every year is just breathtaking to get out there and to see all of the young people and their energy. They know that this is the human rights issue of our time, and they'll do anything to stop it.
On Friday, tens of thousands from all walks of life packing the streets of the nation's capital. Trudging through the snow, a crowd of pro-life advocates stretching from the National Mall all the way down to the Supreme Court. Former staffers of the abortion industry were among them.
The day that a young couple came and told me that they had changed their mind and they wanted to keep their baby, and I was absolutely overwhelmed with joy for them.
Honestly, just the grace of our Lord moved me, and it's because of him I'm standing here today. I don't really have any other explanation.
For those of us who have courage to encourage one another, and we just have to fight the good fight.
The rally comes more than a year after a landmark victory for the pro-life movement, when Roe v. Wade was overturned by the Supreme Court. But to some lawmakers, the fight is far from over. According to Congressman Chris Smith, under the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrance Act, pro-life activists could lose their pensions for protesting and praying outside of abortion facilities.
They can now charge you and bring felonious acts against you for doing that. You can lose your 401k. And where does all the money go? It doesn't go to the Treasury when you're prosecuted. It goes to the Planned Parenthood clinic. When you object to an unjust law, it is the greatest respect for law. And that's what pro-lifers are saying.
James Harden is the president of Compass Care, a pro-life pregnancy center. Last year, one of his facilities in Buffalo, New York, was firebombed and vandalized. But Harden told me that his case has since been sitting in the DOJ's backlog.
The progress basically came to a halt. We had to actually file a lawsuit against the local police department because they were under the thumb of the FBI and they were slow walking the investigation. They let all the leads go cold and die.
Harden urged presidential candidates to embrace the pro-life message and protect all people
Atlanta too.
from womb to tomb. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Sam Wong, NTD News.
NTD's Melina Wisecup has more on the winners and losers of the latest debt cancellation.
President Biden has declared that to date, nearly $137 billion don't have to be paid back by borrowers. The latest cancellation totaling to $4.9 billion.
So that obtaining higher education provides Americans with opportunity and prosperity, not unimaginable burdens of student loan debt.
This as the Education Department fails a financial audit for the second year in a row.
Federal student aid is effectively the nation's largest consumer lender, so a failed financial audit there is a massive problem that far too many people are ignoring.
73,000 Americans are off the hook in this latest round, including public servants like teachers, firefighters, and nurses.
To get student loan borrowers the relief they need to reach their dreams.
But critics say these cancellations aren't free.
He is not really canceling debt so much that he's transferring the burden of student loan debt away from borrowers and onto the rest of the public.
Since the Supreme Court struck down Biden's broader debt cancellation plan last year, the president has been tweaking and expanding the rules of existing programs to skirt around the high court's ruling.
If he really wanted to do this in a constitutional way, he would go to Congress and ask for their approval and permission. President Biden and Education Secretary Cardona have instead tried to enact backdoor loan forgiveness.
Debt cancellation was a major campaign strategy for President Biden in 2020 and could yet again be invoked during this election year. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
Biden.
Energy policy state. Talk to us about how Biden's energy policy impacted Alaska compared to that of former President Trump.
Oh, it's brutal. Night and day. You could have a more different administration. Under President Trump, every opportunity was looked at. We met with the president at least 9 times. When he flew to Alaska here, we would go on Air Force One and would sit down and we'd actually talk about things that Alaska needs. I mean, the president would always say to me, Mike, what does Alaska need? What do you guys want? And so we under President Trump, we got ANWR opened. That was a dream for Alaskans for many, many decades. We were able to get the Tongass National Forest back to a working forest, which is the largest national forest in the country, for timber products, for mining, other activities as well. When it came to any type of resource development, the Trump administration was way, way, way ahead of the Biden administration. Under the Biden administration, We have about 53 to 55 actions against us from the Biden administration. Everything from not honoring the ANWR leases to shutting the Tongass back down. Under this administration, our mining plays are in jeopardy. We're hoping to get a gas line done.
Energy is one of his unfinished business priorities.
Yeah, energy is key. Energy is key to the modern civilization across this world. Energy is key to America's dominance. Energy is key to America's national security. Energy is key to developing not just heating your homes, not just turning on the lights, not just driving your car, but it's part of the pharmaceutical industry. It's part of the medical industry. It's part of agriculture in terms of fertilizer. If we have abundant amount of oil, gas, and other fuels, America will remain on top. Our cost of living will go down. Our standard of living will go up. And a lot of these issues in this chaos that we see now will go away. So that's the goal. And I'm 110% obviously behind President Trump on this issue.
Governor, lastly, the U.S. Department of Energy is funding a number of rare earth mine prospects in Alaska. How would development of those prospects strengthen our national security, particularly with regard to China?
Exactly. We don't have to rely on China. We fell asleep at the wheel. I think part of it was over the last several decades, and maybe there was some wishful thinking that by integrating ourselves to some degree in rare earths and other endeavors with China, we might somehow get them to see the world the way we do. Obviously, that hasn't worked. Yeah, looking back on it, was a bad idea. America has to take care of itself. Getting as much investment in Alaska on rare earths is the way to go, and across this country. Alaska's not selfish. We know that there's a lot of rare earths down in the lower 48 as well, but Alaska was purchased due in part from the Russians in 1867 because of our mineral wealth as a storehouse for America. And so we just need to be able to develop it. If we do, you're going to see great things happen across this country.
Alaska Governor Mike Dunleavy, really appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
Great to be here. Thanks, Steve.
People are concerned about the amount of money we're spending, approaching $34.5 trillion, where all we're doing is punishing our kids, our grandkids, and perhaps their kids. We need to put a stop to that and start really doing what every other state, many other states, I don't know if all of them, have a balanced budget. You can't live on a family that you don't spend money you don't have. And businesses can't continue to go in the red. I don't know why we allow the federal government to do that. One of the other issues that's really resonating with the voters, as we're out there talking to them, is the recovery issue. We have providers out there in rehab facilities that are doing some pretty nefarious things and collecting dollars that they really don't deserve. They drive the costs up. The results are bad. In fact, sometimes people come out worse than they went in. And we need to hold them accountable. And many of these programs are paid through Medicaid, which is obviously federally and state funded. So they should be results oriented and paid based on their outcomes.
Larry Kidd, really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Both China is getting former Vivek Ramaswamy endorsed. The one who's campaigning here and tries to pass on appeal to the end and here actually vote in this better moment from Tommy to lose.
To go with people or with a credit
over
race between Donald Trump and interest in a couple of Nikki Haley's out saying she needed to win New Hampshire, and now their message is a strong second could somehow deliver her the nomination. That's completely preposterous.
And a new tracking poll here in New Hampshire actually shows that Trump is slightly widening his lead over Nikki Haley. Actually, just days before the primary next Tuesday, Trump's polling at 52%, while Nikki Haley is polling at 35%. Meanwhile, on potential VP picks for Trump, we know that among the ones being discussed, at least according to media reports, there are Senator J.D. Vance, who was just here, and also now Senator Tim Scott, as well as Congressman Elise Stefanik, who will be here campaigning for Trump on Saturday. And we also talked to a few Trump supporters here about what they prefer. Watch.
Do like Vivek Ramaswamy. I do think he's an excellent speaker. He's very smart.
I think Vivek is too ambitious for a vice president seat. I think Kristi Noem would be an awesome vice president.
Meanwhile, Trump has said himself that he actually already knew who his VP pick would be, but wouldn't tell us just yet. So a lot to watch for in the coming days, as some of these potential candidates in the talks are going to campaign here in New Hampshire for Trump. Back to you, Tiff.
has long agreed to maintain strategic ambiguity on the Taiwan, reckoning that they want this was for policy Taiwan soon about Taiwan has threatening to Taiwan entering the island from Washington, an island situated first island chain, holding strategic geopolitical value for the U.S. It dominates the semiconductor manufacturing field, producing almost all of the world's most advanced microchips. The Taiwanese government has sought to maintain the status quo with China. The former government of China, the Kuomintang, moved to Taiwan after World War II, when the communists took control. There, they formed the Republic of China, the Taiwan we know today. China has ordered its first major military activity following Taiwan's presidential election. Beijing flew 18 Chinese fighter jets near Taiwan Wednesday. The warplanes carried out joint drills with warships in waters around Taiwan. Beijing regularly sends jets near Taiwan as a way to intimidate the island. The Chinese regime claims Taiwan as its own, despite never having controlled it. It also vowed to take it over by force if necessary. The regime framed Taiwan's presidential election as a choice between peace and war. Taiwan elected William Lai, who was not favored by Beijing. Back to China's warplanes, Taiwan sent its own forces to monitor the situation. Washington is also watching closely. The State Department recently urged Beijing to not use Taiwan's election as a pretext for escalation. Next, we'd like to take a moment to share some of your comments about our show. One viewer, J.A. Crypto, wrote, "It's good that NTD is still calling it the CCP virus so that the world would know what entity caused an epidemic to become a pandemic."
Republican White House administration should look like. Take a look.
I will be candid and say that the agenda that every single member of the administration needs to have is to compile a list of everything that's ever been proposed at the World Economic Forum and object all of them wholesale.
He added that the goal of such a list would be to take away the power of unelected bureaucrats. And the host of the talk later said that the World Economic Forum stands up for liberal democracy, while alleging that former President Trump does the opposite.
It's laughable that you would, or anyone would describe Davos as protecting liberal democracy. It's standing up for it. It's equally laughable to use the word dictatorship at Davos and aim that at President Trump. In fact, I think that's absurd.
Roberts named 5 topics in particular that he says political players mislead people about, and that he believes former President Trump would handle better if re-elected. Those are immigration, public safety in major cities, climate change, the threat China poses to free countries around the globe, and cross-sex ideologies and procedures, which are becoming more and more prevalent. Ariane Pastar, NTD News.
The co-founder and CEO of an AI tech company said it was inevitable that AI technology would become readily available for cheap to anyone, whether their intentions were good or bad.
Back at all of the major general-purpose technologies that have transformed our world, there's a very consistent characteristic, which is to the extent that things get useful, they get cheaper, they get easier to use, and they spread.
Former UK Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg, President of Global Affairs for Meta, said it was crucial large companies don't try to restrict access to powerful AI tools, as it would benefit the developed world.
And still to come, the European Union Parliament resolute stand against the persecution of the spiritual practice Falun Gong in China. And the Chinese regime launches military maneuvers around Taiwan. We discuss what Taiwan's new president means for Beijing.